everyone. So today I'm going to be talking about metabolic health as a foundation for lifelong well-being. And I'm going to be taking a kind of wider lens and look at some of the research that I hope is shaping industry today. And I'm going to focus on personalized approaches to improve your metabolic health. My name is Dr. Kate Birmingham, and I'm Senior Nutrition Science Manager at Zoe, the gut health and personalized nutrition company. And it's a pleasure to be here today. So, to set the scene, when we talk about metabolic health, it's very important to remember that it underpins two things, lifespan and health span. So when we think about aging, we need to think about two key components, our lifespan, how long we live, but also our health span, how well we live. So it's not only our goal to extend our life, but to improve the quality of years that we live. So metabolic health underpins this. And if we can improve our metabolic health, we can not only extend our lifespan, but we can live better for longer. So how can we do this? If someone told you that you could add 10 years to your life with something that you do absolutely every day, you'd be pretty interested. The great news is that the power is on your plate. Every single food that you choose to eat, every meal that you select is an investment in your future self. The single biggest lever that we can pull isn't a new drug, it's the foods that we choose to eat every single day. And these are modifiable, so there's huge opportunity for us here. A striking statistic, 80% of premature deaths are preventable. This tells us that our health destiny is in our hands. We can make changes with the foods that we choose to eat every single day. The people that are creating these foods and the consumers that are buying them, this is huge responsibility, but there is huge opportunity. And the good news is that we can do something about it. However, we all know that we're living in a crazy time. There is now more information than ever, and people seem to be more confused than ever before. Another striking statistic, only 2% of nutrition advice on TikTok is accurate. So is it any wonder that we are now more confused than ever before? But really, when we cut through all the noise, it's relatively straightforward. There's no silver bullet. A handful of dietary factors play a really important role in global health. So, for example, diets high in sodium account for 3 million deaths globally. Diets low in whole grains, another 3 million deaths, and diets low in fruit, 2 million deaths. I can go on. Nuts and seeds, vegetables, legumes, fiber. These are everyday foods, and they are modifiable. We have the power to make change. So I hope it's becoming clear that diet is probably one of our greatest threats, but it's also one of our most powerful tools. Again, the opportunity is ours. In fact, by changing your diet, you can gain almost 10 years at any age. So a really nice research study by Fadness et al. Showed that switching from an unhealthy Western-style diet to an optimal healthy diet gave you 10 years of extra life. So extending your life, living better for longer. The people creating these foods have the possibility to change the future trajectory of our lives at scale. So, it's pretty clear we know what we need to do. We have dietary guidelines which are telling us we know what we should be eating. So why are we not reaching our health potential? There's two key challenges. The first is adherence. Less than 1% of people in the UK are actually following the dietary guidelines. In the US, similarly, it's a sorry state. And secondly, variability. Are we responding the same? Does the dietary advice work the same for everyone? We all respond differently. And this is where personalization becomes critical. We actually know that people are more likely to follow personalized solutions. So if they're going to follow them more closely, and then we also know that they actually might have an even better effect on their health. So can we use personalized approaches to improve efficacy and adherence to our advice or the foods that we consume? To give you a little bit more detail or an example of how we all respond differently, take that example I mentioned earlier, that statistic that diets high in sodium or high salt intake accounts for 3 million deaths globally. The population advice is to reduce salt, which is going to reduce your blood pressure. For 75% of the population, this works. Reducing your salt lowers blood pressure. But for 25% of the population, a quarter of us, salt reduction has little to no effect. So these people can literally have their salt and eat it. If they are non-responders, surely their efforts could be put into focusing on a dietary change that's going to meaningfully impact their health. So the question is, does the advice work if we're all responding very differently? So this brings me on to the research that we're doing today at Zoe. We're running the PREDICT program of research. It is the largest ongoing program to measure individual metabolic responses to food and lifestyle. We want to understand how people are responding differently, what are the drivers of these differences, and can we modify them to improve our health and give people extra healthy years? This research is made possible through collaboration of nutrition academia and tech companies. And to date, we have over 350,000 participants through. And these people have done remote clinical testing from the comfort of their home. And we're really trying to understand in real world settings what's going on. To give you a sense of the scale, we have over 12 million meals logged in the Zoe app. We have over 4 million CGM glucose day readings. So we have got participants to wear continuous glucose monitors which measure blood glucose levels every 15 minutes alongside all those meals that they're eating. We've asked them to consume over 500,000 standardized meals. So we've given them identical foods and we've looked how they have responded while measuring blood measures and metagenomic or their microbiome samples. We also have very detailed health history. So this is the world's largest in-depth nutritional research program, and we're really trying to understand how individuals respond to foods in the real world. We have data at no scale ever before, and we have one of the largest microbiome databases worldwide. So what we have been focusing on is the post-meal responses, and I'd love to explain to you why this is so important to us, and hopefully I can. So when we eat a food, our body responds. Our blood glucose increases, it spikes up and comes down, and our blood fat slowly rises and comes down. So our blood glucose is shown in the orange there, and the blood fat is in the green. But we all know this isn't what a typical day looks like. We eat multiple meals, we eat multiple snacks. There's a lot of eating occasions, and really this is a noisy day. We see peaks and troughs in our blood glucose, which is the orange, and our blood fat gradually increases throughout the day and starts to come down. These are normal, healthy metabolic responses. But what we know actually is prolonged time in elevated ranges is where the danger happens. This is where unfavorable health effects occur. So this is the danger zone. And what we're trying to do at Zoe is to understand why people are responding differently, why some people are going so high, what is driving these differences, and how we can modify them to improve our health. So we did just that. We fed 1,000 people identical food, an identical meal, and we tracked their blood sugar and their blood fat levels for the next 6 hours. And you can see here, this is the average response for these 1,000 individuals. Looks pretty normal, right? But actually, when you plot every single individual, there is huge differences in how we respond to identical foods. So each line here is an individual, and you can see some people are really, really high and stay high for a long time. At that 6-hour time at the end, they're still really high. Some people are in the middle and some people are below. So this really highlights differences between individuals in our blood fat and blood sugar responses to identical meals. So it really asks the question, how meaningful is the mean or the average response? There's opportunity for personalization here if we're not responding the same. An important question we often get asked, or people often say, it's due to my genes, it runs in my family. We know we can't modify our genes. So we wanted to look at just that. Oh, so this isn't really working. You can't see the images, but hopefully I can talk you through them. So identical twins share around 99% of their genes. So if you take a highly heritable trait like height and you plot one twin against the other, you get a really nice linear line. So you can tell that they're very similar for that trait. So we did that. We fed identical twins, identical foods, and we looked at how they responded. And actually, it was really noisy. There was points all over the place. And this really told us that identical twins have very different responses to the same foods. So our genes do not dictate our responses. They don't explain most of the post-meal metabolic differences. So if it's not our genes, we went on to try and understand what are the drivers of variability? What is making us respond so differently? And we started to look at these factors for blood fat and blood sugar. And there's many different factors. They're different for the different responses. But actually, when you look at it, we're able to break it into kind of three important groups. After what we're eating, we now know that who we are, how we eat, and how we live our lives is very important. They play fundamental roles. They are the drivers of the variability in our metabolic responses. So I'm going to give you some examples of these. For example, who we are. We know our genes, our microbiome, our metabolome are important. How we eat, a really interesting area, is a driver of response. The time of day that we choose to eat, the order of the foods that we consume, our snacking patterns and behaviors, how long we fast for, how many hours of the day we're eating for, and also our eating rate. So how fast we eat our foods. And then finally, how we live our lives is important. How well we slept the night before, how active we were. So there is opportunity to personalize here, and there's a potential untapped opportunity to improve and add extra years to your life by modifying some of these. So what we did really is we went on to start to jump into these factors, who we are, how we eat, and how we live, to really understand a bit more about them and to see if we can modify these to try and improve our health. So our gut microbiome, it's no shock to anyone here that there is an abundance, an explosion of gut solutions. We are all very interested in our gut microbiome. There is now more research than ever. We're learning more every day, but it's a really exciting area because I think there still is much, much more to learn. What we do know is that our gut microbiome is truly personalized. I can identify you from you. We're unique. Historically, or in the past, research has sort of focused on disease states. So if you get a disease, how your microbiome looks different, how it's changed. But at Zoe, we wanted to actually extend life and get people to live healthier for longer. So we wanted to know what a healthy microbiome looks like. And we have done just that. In a recent Nature publication, we were able to define a healthy microbiome for the first time. So now we know what it looks like. We ask the question, can we shift or move a person's microbiome with dietary intervention or with whole food supplements to get them to a healthier state? And the answer is yes. Yes. This is really, really exciting because we now know the microbiome is so intimately involved in so many facets of health, from immunity to our brain and our mood to metabolic health and aging. If we can modify our microbiome through diet, we can unlock our health potential. So this is a really, really great area. I'm going to talk now a bit about how we eat and how we live, which is quite novel and hopefully interesting to you here today. So we all differ in the speed that we eat our foods. Around a third of us are fast eaters, so we gobble down the foods that we eat. And we know that for people that eat fast, that they have higher belly fat, that they have higher energy intake at a meal, and over time, this behavior leads to worse metabolic health. But we also know that we can modify how fast we eat or our eating rate. For example, the foods that we choose to eat can reduce our eating speed. We can use texture to reduce eating rate. We also know that foods that are soft and chewy, that are high in energy density, are easily overconsumed. And this, coupled with a fast eating rate, is even more detrimental to health. So we can change this to impact those post-meal metabolic responses and long-term health. We also know that we differ in our sleep habits. What's interesting is what we saw is after a particularly poor night's sleep, people have experienced increased cravings, leading to bad choices. They have higher hunger, leading to overeating and increased calorie intake. We have worse post-meal glucose responses and just generally poor metabolic health. So unfortunately for many of us here, we know that we can't necessarily or always control our sleep. I have a 2-year-old. Yes, we've had a lot of bad night's sleep. But what I can control is the foods that I choose to eat the next morning. So I can, through my food choice, I can choose nutrient-dense foods, foods with combinations of fats, carbohydrates, fibers, protein, to dampen down that elevated post-glucose response after the bad night's sleep and set me up for a more successful day. So we have power to modify these responses. We also know that we differ in the timing and duration of eating. So this is an interesting one. We asked people to take part in the big intermittent fasting study. And for anyone who doesn't know, your eating window is calculated as the first time they eat in the morning to the last time you eat at night. And actually, a lot of people consume or are eating for 12 to 14 hours per day for a really long time. And they don't have that much time to fast. So what we asked them to do was to reduce down their eating window to 10 hours per day. And what we saw after a couple of weeks was really quite surprising. Over 150,000 people took part in this study, and they self-reported increased mood, increased energy, but they also had lower energy intake and lower body weight, so significant improvements on their metabolic health. We also know that the time of day that you eat also impacts your health. So we were particularly interested in snacking. We know that 95% of people are snackers, and actually you get 25% of your calories daily from snacks, which is a quarter of the foods and your energy intake per day. So there's huge potential in this area, and the quality of your snacks really do matter. But when we looked at timing, we found that people that were snacking after 9 p.m. had higher amounts of belly fat, higher energy intake, and again, this sustained behavior over time can lead to worse or poorer metabolic health. So maybe tonight, when you're sitting in front of the TV and having your late night snack, you might think twice. But some of these benefits of how we eat are mediated by our microbiome. So again, this microbiome is cropping up in many areas of health that we actually previously weren't even aware of. So hopefully I have shown you that the post-meal metabolic responses matter. We're starting to identify the drivers of why people respond differently. And we've been researching these drivers to understand them more and also to see if we can modify them to improve our health. So our final question that we had was, can we create truly personalized advice and target these post-meal responses to actually meaningfully impact your health? And we did just that. We took an individual's post-meal blood sugar and blood fat responses. We took all of our learnings about who we are, for example, our microbiome, how we eat and how we live our lives, and we created a personalized dietary program. And we tested this in a randomized control trial. So we compared it to standard dietary advice. So we took USDA American dietary advice that everyone is recommended to follow, and we compared our personalized dietary program. After 4 months, we saw significant improvements in blood fat levels and waist circumference and many other health outcomes, including the microbiome, in comparison to that control group on standard dietary advice. So this tells us that a personalized dietary program using these drivers that we can personalize on can improve cardiometabolic health compared to a control, which is really exciting. So to wrap up, I hope this talk has kind of given you a flavor that it's not just what we are eating, but also who we are, how we eat, and how we live our lives. There's huge opportunity for personalization, and people are more likely to follow personalized solutions, whether they're ingredients, diets, you name it. And they may actually have a better effect on your health. So as we move forward, it's important to rethink nutrition, not just for lifespan, but for health span. We want to improve the quality of those years. And it's not a late life fix. It starts with every single meal and every single plateful of food that you choose to eat today. Your post-meal responses shape your health, and they're important. We can measure them. They're personal and changeable. We can modify them. We can use personalization, but nutrition should always be evidence-based and sustainable where possible. And my parting remark is to bring back joy to food. Enjoy the food, be mindful, appreciate the senses. And for those of you out there creating it, design it to truly nourish health. Thank you very much.